All right, I think we're live. Awesome. So, for those of you tuning in, this is the first episode of the Bridge to Impact. And I'll just take a moment to introduce myself and a bit about what this is all about, and move on to introduce the incredible folks that I have the privilege of having this conversation with today. So my name is Raj. I'm a co-founder of Meaningful Work and currently the CEO. And what Meaningful Work is a community to connect people who want to give back with incredible organizations that are doing great work in our community. So we started about 2 years ago. We've been continuing to build a network of nonprofits and individuals and engaged companies who want to give back. And right now we have over 200 nonprofits in our network, 300 volunteers, and a growing list of companies. So this podcast really came to light when the idea for it came from the conversations that I've had the privilege of having with so many incredible changemakers throughout the journey of building meaningful work. And some of those folks are Katie and Sumreen. So Katie, I had the chance to work with as she was one of our mentors early on, giving us really good feedback on our product and how to really engage employees through volunteering work and doing it in a really great way. And Sumreen is a co-founder of Moment Energy, and they're one of the companies that have signed on with us and have done some really great work engaging the industry around sustainability. So I will, leave it to Katie and Sumreen to continue to introduce themselves. But I just want to give a bit more context on the idea behind this podcast and why it's called the Bridge to Impact. It's because as we continue to push out innovation, and we really need to consider collaboration as a way to work together towards the sustainable future that we're building. And the idea behind the Bridge to Impact was a series of dialogues to engage folks in the nonprofit world, the company, corporate world, individuals who want to give back, and create dialogues between some of the most important ideas out into the community. And this was really inspired as well by my experience at the SFU Center for Dialogue, where we would spend our summers just outside and having dialogues about nature, surrounded by these giant cottonwood trees and open fields. And I wanted to bring some of that energy to this online space that we're living in, and maybe have some outdoor dialogues soon as well. Without further ado, I'd like to get started. Just have a bit of a check-in question for Katie and Sumreen, which is what does Earth do, and where are you calling in from? I'll just start with where I'm calling in from. I'm calling in from South Surrey, BC, on the traditional unceded territories of the Semiahmoo First Nation. And I'll pass it on to you, Katie, and where are you calling in from?
Great. Thanks, Raj. Yeah, so I am currently in Toronto on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the First Nations of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And Earth Day to me is a moment of reflection and reconnection because I think that we spend so much time in front of a screen, 8 hours a day. Many of us are just sitting here and we forget that there's a whole world outside. Even when you're doing sustainability work, it's often easy to forget the big picture. So I spend my time out in nature every moment that I can, especially on Earth Day, and reflecting on my decisions, my lifestyle, and the work that I'm ultimately trying to do. So it's been outside and thinking for the most part.
That's awesome. How about you, Sumreen?
Yeah, so I am calling in from Surrey, and I want to acknowledge that I am on the shared and unceded traditional territory of the Katsik, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish peoples. And in terms of what Earth Day means to me, by the way, I loved what you said, Katie, about using it as a day to reconnect. For me, in addition to that, it's really to reflect on what I've been doing to promote sustainability, and what sort of practices that I've been fulfilling, if there's things that I can improve on, and really just to think about Mother Nature as a whole and how we can leave a sustainable generation for the years to come.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, Earth Day to me is as well just, it's a time of reflection. It's a time of thinking about what does the future look like, and how can I be a part of that. So really resonate with what you both have said. I'd like to just start, just let folks get to know a bit about you with a question, and that is, I'd love to learn about each of your journeys to date in sustainable impact and what has kept you going through the process. And yeah, maybe I'll start with you, Katie.
Great. I might just like rewind it pretty far actually, because I feel like my journey started quite a long time ago. Um, and I guess it was in high school when a lot of the conversation around climate change and the environment was coming to greet the headlines. And it was always about environment versus economy. Like the two could not possibly work together. We can't protect the environment, it'll put the economy at risk. And I remember hearing about that all the time while also witnessing these photos of polar bears on melting ice caps, because that tended to be the mascot of the early climate change movement. And that's what inspired me to then go and study environmental science and economics and policy. And I thought, if I'm going to make the right change, I need to understand how the environment works and I need to understand how our economic system works so that I can act as this translator across both sides. So, I can help environmentalists do work that would resonate with economists and vice versa. And as I studied and went on that journey, I did a semester in Haida Gwaii and doing natural resource management studies. And for a long time, I thought that the the solution was going to be top down. It had to be government making policies. Politics was the way, because that's often, what I was listening to and hearing. But Haida Gwaii taught me that a lot while I was there. But they have such a strong grassroots nation there. The Haida are so strong. They are resilient. And it taught me that not everything is top down, that people can come together and really create that change. And I left Haida Gwaii thinking, um, I need to take a different approach to how I've looked at sustainability. And that's when I came back to Toronto and started at Fix, a maintenance software company based out of Toronto, doing sustainability and social impact. So at this startup of only 20 employees, I was brought in to do this work that hadn't necessarily been done at the time. And that's where we embedded our B Corp certification and upgraded our HR policies, our environmental footprint, connected with the community, and looked at our product as a whole to see how we were actually creating that change. And I know like this is a long journey to get to where I am today, but while I was at Fix, I learned that business can be a force for good. And you can work in a company of any size. It doesn't have to be a big industry. It could be a small 20-person startup. It's now 200 people today, over 200. I think it's 300 now. But they were able to integrate that from early on. And post Fix, I've been doing sustainable procurement at Reeve Consulting, where we help to embed ESG practices into procurement and the supply chain. So long-winded answer, but that's been my journey to date, and it's just been a collection of learnings along the way.
Thanks, Katie. That's really impressive, and it's also really great to hear how it started from a very early stage in your life, and how you had to, really wrestled with a bit of the approach to sustainability, and how that carried forward throughout your career. It's really inspiring, and I think that's something that many of us tackle, not really knowing what the best way is to tackle this problem, which is so gigantic. And I love the different approaches that you've taken there.
Thanks. Yeah.
How about you, Sumreen? What is your journey and sustainable impact?
Yeah, I mean, so I love what you said at the end there, Raj, about how there's so many different ways to tackle this problem. And that's something that for me, it started in high school as well, where we relearned all about the mascot of the glaciers, the polar bear, and then also watching. I remember there was a documentary. I can't remember if it was in high school or after that, with Leonardo DiCaprio, just talking about environmental change, and just it was shocking almost to see it, even though we've grown up with it. But something that I started off with, and I always encourage other people to do, is the little things like turning off the lights, unplugging things from the outlet, just being very cautious of not using electricity unless we really need to. And the same thing with, I remember I would go to like events where they'd give these timers you could stick in the shower. So I would just turn it over and be like, okay, 2 minute shower, that's all I got. And I remember I remember they would give out faucets that you could put on, so that you reduce the water, like you reduce the water pressure coming out when you're doing the dishes. So things like that is kind of where my journey started on making change. And then after that, going into university, then I was a part of the mechatronic systems engineering program at SFU. And we learned a lot about the clean tech space, electric vehicles in particular, because that started becoming more of a common thing. So even now, if you look on the road, there's a lot more Teslas out there than you would have seen 5 years ago, which is amazing. And that piqued my interest as well, and just looking into how, from a technology perspective, what changes can we make to have more sustainable tech, to be thinking about our environment, make changes in that sense. So that really led to the co-founding of Moment Energy. And we're a clean tech startup that is repurposing retired electric vehicle batteries into energy storage systems. So our goal is to really create a circular economy for the electric vehicle batteries and to make EVs a cleaner solution, because I know that that's been a concern for a lot of people, is that our electric vehicles really more clean than alternative gas solutions, which they are. But the question arises in the supply chain, and what are we going to do with the batteries after they come out? There's a lot of other things that we have to think about when it comes to producing technology. So that's been a big driving factor for me, is like Raj said, focusing on one problem within the large problem in the grand scheme of things. If all of us do this, then we can make a huge difference.
It's really cool. I love the kind of transition that you've made from that, like the personal environmental things that you can do, to taking that and scaling that up to an industry-wide solution. So that's something that I see often, is many people start with just small things, and those small things are great, and sometimes they're just culturally ingrained or things that we learned from school, and it ends up creating a change bigger than you might have thought. So, yeah.
Yeah, actually, just on that topic of culturally ingrained, something I thought I'd share, which was really interesting, is I was talking to my mom a couple weeks ago, and she mentioned how she grew up in India, that there were no plastics. So they actually used to use reusable, like leaf containers, for their food. So there weren't plastic containers, plastic bags. None of that was really a thing until maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, when plastics became more popular. So I thought it was interesting that back when she grew up and before that, that people were already using sustainable efforts. And now we're like 30 years later, diving back into what people did maybe 50 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think that plastics were only introduced, and used commercially in the past 30 years, and we've got such a massive plastic pollution problem.
Yeah. And there's people I've spoken to as well that said that at first they used to advertise plastics, I can't validate this, but they saw advertisements where plastics were shown as an alternative to cutting down trees. So people thought, okay, this is what we should be doing. And now we're if you look now, we're banning plastics in stores and have paper bags. So it's really interesting to see that how powerful media influence can be as well in educating people on what is a sustainable practice and what isn't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if it took us, 30 years to get into this problem, it can take us 30 years or less to get out of it. It just, just need to focus on it and make it a priority.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think of how like media really. I think as much as technology needs to be out there, sometimes it's public opinion that sways a lot of things, and we need to be part of that, as we need to like dialogue as folks create a better world. So it's really neat. Katie, I was
Mhm.
wondering, you've been through a long career of just being able to create sustainable changes at whatever organization that you've been a part of. Do you have any advice for folks who want to make a sustainable change within their current organization?
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes back, well, it all builds on each other, but banding together is like the number one thing that you can do because you're not the only one that cares at your organization. And you're probably thinking the same thing as like the person next to you or on your team. It's simply a matter of bringing it to everyone's attention. And I think speaking up will, it'll highlight you as someone who's engaged and really cares about things. Having the conversation isn't easy, but it's not because it's a part of our collective consciousness is in the media now. It's not so far fetched to be bringing it up. So I think that's a really good first step. There's also a publication that Project Drawdown put together. And if you don't know Project Drawdown, it's a nonprofit that essentially took all of these climate solutions and then ranked them in order of their impact level. So it's saying there is a point in time when all of the carbon emissions will be drawn down back into carbon sinks again and then reduced to be net zero. That's, the whole idea behind it. And Project Drawdown came up with this publication called Climate Solutions at Work. And it highlights how you as an individual can create that change. And the first thing they say is get together with like-minded people and form those groups and be vocal about it. They also, and I think this is a really critical skill in sustainability, is having the ability to persuade and to communicate in a way that will be well received from your audience. So they say to do power mapping with your colleagues. And then they also say to join action oriented groups and to learn more about how your organization in particular has the capacity to create change. And it sounds like a lot of work, but again, baby steps. It doesn't have to be done. You're not going to boil the ocean in one day. Hopefully. Hopefully we don't do that. But yeah, just those baby steps, having conversations and just being part of the change. That's really what it comes down to.
That's really neat. I've personally had the experience of just kind of expressing my interest in sustainability, and my manager being able to connect me to someone, even the director of sustainability at the company. And that was something, an experience that I really loved. That was back when I was doing actually a co-op at Apple, and getting to just put your intention out there, I think, and finding like-minded people really resonates with me. I remember we had, we call this just folks that are really distributed across the company, and functions that were just working together in this really distributed way. So exciting and new to me.
Yeah,
Um,
and it makes work so much more enjoyable and rewarding when, you can take a break from the everyday and actually converse about the things that might matter to you and how you can create a change together. I think there's so much value in that. So that's really cool to hear.
for sure. Yeah, Sumreen, I'm kind of curious from your perspective too. How do you see folks making change, or do you have any advice for people that do want to make a sustainable impact?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I can kind of bring two different perspectives. One is from the organizational standpoint. So being in a company and trying to figure out how we want to best serve the environment is super important. Something that we did at Moment Energy is we actually were a part of this workshop, an impact workshop, where we sat down and discussed our company's values, where we want to make a difference. And then we actually tied them directly into UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we're able to recognize which ones that we can focus on, because there's so many, but we knew there was we could pull some of them that we could really make a difference in. And we tried to tie in some of our practices already into those goals, and then also some we created goals for things that we weren't doing but wanted to accomplish in the next 5-10 years. So that's something that I recommend that other organizations that are in the same position to go through. Just think about what you want to achieve. And there's so many resources out there, like the UN SDGs is one example of things that are clearly laid out that we can help make a difference in. So we now are able to identify and share, like in all of our slide decks when we're talking to investors, customers, suppliers, that, hey, these are the goals that we're trying to work towards. And we hope that you are on the same page as us, or are also trying to be an impact-driven organization. So yeah, that's something I can advise on from an organizational standpoint. And then from like just being within the company itself, I think kind of touches on what Katie said, is just finding people, like-minded people that are willing to do things together to help promote, to help tackle climate change. So for example, within our organization, we want people to bring in initiatives like organizing volunteer activities, maybe doing trail cleanups, or anything really, from trail cleanups to going and helping the homeless. There's just a wide array of things that we can help with, and we want to empower people within our org to have that, to feel comfortable taking that initiative and drawing in others to help them with that goal.
I guess how do you how do you kind of go about and find those people and get involved in those conversations around like purpose and vision? If maybe that's something you've never done before, what are some tips that you might have for folks just starting that journey?
Me or Sumreen? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry, Raj. Yeah, getting started on purpose is definitely a big undertaking. I was just talking about it earlier today, where purpose transcends like every part of the organization, right? And it's a top-down approach, because ultimately the board of directors and the C-suite is responsible for it. But purpose also makes its way into every job description when it's done effectively. So I think from an individual perspective, if you can analyze your own role and better understand, okay, if I am contributing to more than just generating profits for this organization, what does that look like? So if I'm in sales, maybe I'm selling to 20% more renewable energy companies, for example, than I am the other companies. And that's my small contribution. Or maybe if I'm a hiring manager, I'm able to create a more diverse team than I would be otherwise. And these are small pieces. Purpose is much larger than that. But by the time it makes it to the individual level, that's ultimately how it's going to be enacted. I think because this work is generally new. I mean, the sustainability movement wasn't started only 10 years ago. We've been talking about it for a long time. But now that leaders are on board, I think there's a lot of questions around how do we do this? If we can help bring attention to how we actually can do that, bringing forth B Corp certification as an option for your company and outlining, here's how long this might take us to do. Here's the cost that might be involved. I'm willing to help and contribute in some capacity. And hey, I talked with my team and there's 5 others that are willing to join. I think that's going to help build that case for your leaders, because you're able to paint a picture for them. And I think that's what it comes down to, is how can you paint a picture that will be appealing to them.
I love that. Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed everything that I would share as well. And yeah, from both perspectives, because it does, I agree with you, it does start from, it is a top-down approach for the most part, where you have people that already believe in these things. And it makes it a lot easier for at the individual level to come up and share ideas. And I think it's definitely a responsibility for the leadership team to create that safe space for people to come to them and say what you said, like bringing up ideas and saying, hey, we have a team of people that want to do this. Let's work towards it. So it's really empowering to have everybody on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I do that. And something I've heard colleague Tessica Truong is about the concept of brave spaces. So not just having a safe space and saying it's safe because now suddenly it's safe and you're not, it's having a brave space where folks are able to come out and share those feelings about the space itself, which is really cool. So I think brave spaces for sustainability, common, and I think hard to come by, especially where you can have questions about maybe how you're feeling about climate change, or how a decision made by the company impacts you. And I think these are just such important things that we can start developing, and they're actually relatively new, as you mentioned, Katie. So yeah, just love those ideas.
Thanks for sharing that, Rajiv. It's my first time hearing about the term brave space, but I love it, the concept of it. Definitely going to implement that at Moment.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. It has me thinking like what constitutes as a brave or safe space. And like the first thing that comes to mind for me is like removing any level of judgment that you might be holding walking into that, and then allowing for compassion and empathy for others, because you don't want to be judged when you are trying to share something. And, in order for us to be vulnerable, we need to know that we can share without any consequences. So, I mean, for me personally, that's something I'm always double checking. Like, how am I going to create that for others? I'd love to hear what you think too.
Yeah, and how we're empowering as well is what I was thinking about. Is like when I think of the term brave space, I think of people who are being empowered to speak their minds and to influence change. So that ties directly into making sure that they feel comfortable and are able to have that opportunity to talk about what changes they want to see.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another component is one of the values we have at Meaningful Work is open-minded dialogue. So it ties into having that open mind when you come into that conversation, maybe letting go of some of your personal convictions a little bit, just to understand and empathize else in that moment. And it takes a lot of practice to create that. But I think also having a culture of iteration where you're able to reflect on maybe how the discussion went and what can we do better next time. And I think not just accepting everything as it is also a really key component to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess speaking about the sustainable change that we're making, I'm sure there must have been as many successes, but also a lot of times of learning and setbacks along the way. I'm kind of curious if there's been a moment of adversity that you faced in your journey, and how you reacted to that. Maybe Sumreen can go first this time.
Yeah, so for me, the moment of adversity that comes to mind is maybe not directly tied into the conversation on Earth Day, but it's back when. So 2 years ago, before Moment Energy, my co-founders and I were part of a different startup we had founded during our days at SFU. It was a mental health startup to help people cope with anxiety through using a brain stimulating device. So that was something that our entire team was very passionate about. All of us had either experienced anxiety or known someone close to us who has gone through it. And we wanted to figure out a way to help them using our tech expertise. but it ended up being that we had 5 co-founders at the time. One of them had gone out to a meditation retreat, and when he came back, he realized that the tech solution wasn't something that that he felt was the right fit for him anymore. So for us, it was a pretty big deal to lose one of our co-founders, and to really brought us back to reflect on if it was the right startup for us or not. And then at the end, we did decide to pivot away from that space. But it wasn't necessarily because it wasn't necessarily because we don't believe that tech can go hand in hand with mental health solutions. I definitely think that there are so many ways for technology to bridge that gap into, especially with the younger generation coming in who grow up with so much technology. But for us, it was more so that our skills ended up being better aligned in the climate tech space. We had all worked with electric vehicles before. One of our co-founders worked at Tesla. And then we realized that where we could make the most change, the maximum change, was in clean tech. And that's why we decided to move into repurposing electric vehicle batteries.
What a story. That is so cool. I wish I had something amazing to share like that, but I don't. When it comes to sustainability in business, like, you're constantly facing challenges and adversity. It's just like this push and pull all the time, having to defend or prove the business case for sustainability, getting pushback, finding a new avenue or a new route to get there, and waiting it out. I find that despite all the challenges, people come around. They just need time to assess on their own and come to their own conclusions, rather than you telling them this is the right thing or it's going to be the best for brand value or the most savvy thing for us. So while I don't have a single like story to share, I think it's something that we're constantly facing. And I'm sure it's the same for you, Sumreen, to raise money and having to show the value of things and communicate that all the time. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, Serene, well, I really like how you tackling these really hard social problems, and taking the angle of technology and being able to even just shift from the mental health space to sustainability space, and which are actually like really quite linked. Is we learn more about climate anxiety, and just there's just so much like interconnection or intersectionality of these issues, that it's really it's really interesting to hear that story, and how you've been able to shift, but still like do something that's very purpose driven, and that was more aligned towards that maximum impact. How does that and creating our maximum impact, that is something that many of us do aspire to, I guess. And yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, and how might you, as someone who doesn't know what that area of that sweet spot of creating impact and doing something, how you might try to discover that, or put yourself in a place where discovering that becomes easy?
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of tell from my story that it's not necessarily something that I even knew going into it. So it's trial and error. There's nothing wrong with trying something new and realizing that that's not the right fit for you. But yeah, really through looking at different things that you want to make an impact in, so maybe doing some self-reflection on what, like, from the inside, like what are things that drive you and make you passionate, and just trying out those different things and seeing how your skills can align with them. I think that's how the best way to figure out what that sweet spot is. You can't really do it without trying, is my advice.
Yeah, and Katie, you mentioned about the constant, like, a bit of a battle, it sounds like, to push forward sustainable change in your organization, but always having different setbacks and always having to defend uh, your initiatives, for example. um, how do you have the courage to go through that daily, and what keeps you going?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. What does keep us going in all of this? Because I feel like we're constantly faced with hardships and and challenges. I mean, for me, I'm an eternal optimist, and while a lot of people believe you can't be an optimist because you're not rooted in reality, I think that you can. I think you can be optimistic and also rooted in reality. And I try to focus on the things that have been done that are going well rather than focusing on all the scary things that might happen or might not happen. Because when it comes to anxiety and climate anxiety, and I'm no mental health expert, but it feels too big and out of our control. And I think that's when we start to get anxious because it is out of our control. If we can just reel that back in, put the change and the power into our own hands for whatever it is that we can do, that's when I start to feel more empowered again. Like something that I can do is unplugging my electronics and turning off the lights, right? I can take a 2-minute shower. Those are things that I can do, and that will make me feel better about it. And when it comes to the workplace, it's the small wins that need to be celebrated while working towards something much bigger. And just because something has set you back, that's all it is. It's just a setback. It's simply a timeline that's been shifted. Because as I mentioned, things come around. Things come around. It's really just a matter of time.
Yeah, I've also heard that you might I guess it's overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years. And the idea of small wins and celebrating those along the way is just so important. I think it brings teams together to rally around not just the wins, things that you tried that didn't work, and what came out of that. So yeah, just
Yeah.
really love those thoughts there.
Yeah, there's always a win, even in the quote unquote failures, right? There's something there to be found.
Now, I guess building towards that vision or what we can do in the 5 to 10 years, if we do want to create that sustainable future, and this is a question for either of you, what does doing business look like in 2030?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think something that comes to mind, and I was at a workshop at a leadership summit a couple of weeks ago where they talked about this. So in the 70s, there was something called the People First movement. So at that time there within organizations there wasn't a huge emphasis on employee mental health or having just safe workplaces for them. There was very harmful practices in place. So that's where People First movement started. And of course, there's still so much change that needs to be made in that space. But I feel that something similar could happen in the sustainability space, is just having organizations think about that environmental impact and how it can tie into, just like Katie was saying, you can have both. You can have an environmental impact or just be an impact driven organization and be a successful business. And that's something that I tell people all the time. So when I think about doing business in 2030, it's having organizations with that mindset and knowing that they don't need to sacrifice one for the other, and they can focus on both. They can have economic growth and have these goals and practices in place, thinking about sustainable development goals and having things like B Corp certification to help guide the process.
Yeah, definitely. I wholeheartedly agree. And I actually love this question of envisioning what the future can look like, because that's exciting and we don't get to talk about it nearly enough. In a positive world, what could it be? Especially because we've been fed doom and gloom all the time. And what does business look like in 2030? I think every company is purpose driven. Every company is B Corp certified. Every company is employee owned. Employees aren't burnt out. They understand how their role contributes to the common good. We've achieved the UN SDGs. This would, it's not impossible. And I love the idea of working towards a world that looks like that. Because if you don't have that vision and what that looks like, how are you going to know how to get there? And I actually want to share a quote because I think it is quite quite relevant to this question. So Dr. Donella Meadows is a thought leader in systems change. And she has this long quote. It goes, "The future can't be predicted, but it can be envisioned and brought lovingly into being. Systems can't be controlled, but they can be designed and redesigned. We can't surge forward with certainty into a world of no surprises, but we can expect surprises and learn from them and even profit from them. We can't impose our will upon a system. We can listen to what the system tells us and discover how its properties and our values can work together to bring forth something much better than could have ever been produced by our will alone. We can't control the system or figure them out, but we can dance with them." And I just love that.
That's amazing.
Give me chills listening to it. It's such a great quote.
Thanks for sharing that, for sure. I love what you said. That vision is just so clear, the way you said it, that every company should be X, Y, and Z. It's definitely something we can work towards. And I was thinking about the B Corp certification and how cultural shifts are so important. So as soon as you have like 9 out of 10 companies doing something like that, being B Corp certified, that one other company is going to feel that, okay, I can't be the only one without this. So it definitely helps.
Yeah, imagine that, right? Where we have sustainability competitions between companies and like the industry more broadly. That's where things are headed, and that's the future that I foresee. And of course, when it comes to sustainability, there's a whole other layer of indicators when it comes to nature and people and how our systems function together. But when it comes to business in particular, I would say that's what I think it will look like.
That's actually a really important point, and something that comes up in a lot of my conversations as well is that I think you guys have probably heard of the topic of greenwashing, and it's important to be able to quantify and show results for the things that we're talking about. So even as an organization, if I'm saying that we are a sustainable company, like people should ask, okay, what does that mean? Like, what are you actually measuring? What difference are you making? So that it's not just a label. It should have outcomes and results as well.
100%. Yeah. I don't think we can keep going down this path without clear indicators of success around these topics. The same way that you can't just fudge your finances, you shouldn't be able to fudge your sustainability KPI.
Exactly.
Yeah, I really love that. We're doing the B Corp certification for meaningful work and going through that process. There's just so many layers to it as well, like you mentioned, and they do have an SDG component of it as well, and you can go through and see how that that change and impact aligns with the SDGs. And it's been really great also just to talk to so many companies who see employee driven change as one of those really important factors when achieving sustainability, and trying to understand what are some of the metrics that we've been able to learn from them, implement into our meaningful work platform, and also think about what are the metrics that we need to be measuring in the future as well, and as we kind of move on from this B Corp as a baseline, I would say, and then there's so much to grow from there. So yeah, it's just this idea about metrics and being able to measure them, but also seeing, like, defining what success looks like in the vision, I think is so important for organizations. And I think folks that are getting into the sustainability space, that's something that's really exciting, that I think you can definitely engage with your company or start asking these questions, like it's a really easy question to ask, and if you don't have the answer, then maybe it's time to start looking into it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm really curious. You talked about systems and how we're many ways dancing, like the engineering background of myself and Sumreen is like, oh, we work with systems all the time, and it does feel like a dance many times, or maybe you're throwing stuff at it and seeing trying to get it to work. But yeah, just really love that imagery. But I think within every system, it's a set of interconnected nodes, and there's always connections and partnerships between that drive that system either to success or towards failure. And kind of curious, what does that effective partnership look like in sustainable change, and is there any experiences of that through partnership that you've been able to see greater change being achieved?
Yeah, so I'm seeing companies, so larger organizations that are looking more into like where they have that traditional label of being invested in fossil fuels and et cetera. I see them trying to change their image and actually do things like work with clean tech companies and trying to divert what their current business operations are towards something that they see in the long term being a more viable solution. So, for example, moving away from, let's say, an oil and gas company, moving away from that and into the electric vehicle charging space is an example of it. So that's something that is coming. I would say not every organization's thinking that way, but I see a few that are starting to. And then in terms of an effective partnership, I think that it comes down to really discussing between you and your partner, like what your values are and making sure you align on that, and also holding the other person or other group accountable to it. So it's a lot easier if you're already a company that's it's recognized and is a more powerful position, because if you can imagine like a large company saying to someone else that, hey, we'll work with you, but only if you are adhering to these X, Y, and Z principles. That's so powerful if they're able to do that. And that's something that I hope that Moment Energy can end up being in the position of doing, that when we can talk to people, we tell them, okay, we have that influence now, and they will be willing to make that change to work with us.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely resonate. I think right now there isn't a lot of listening happening when it comes to partnerships generally. There's a lot of agenda pushing or, coming up with something and then getting agreement or consulting after the fact. And I think co-development is really the key, and not just trying to do what you want to do and then check in afterwards. Like, if we're really going to engage stakeholders, if we're really going to drive change, it's a matter of actually having those conversations, listening, and then applying those learnings. So I don't think it's easy, because something like that takes a lot more time if it's going to be done right. But, understanding that time is a factor that needs to be put into practice, and accepting that for what it is. That's the only way we can effectively collaborate, is if we listen and take the time to actually implement those learnings.
For sure. And I think even in an ideal world, it would be that if we see companies that aren't engaging in sustainable or in sustainable practices, or are doing unethical things within the organization, that they're essentially, that no one wants to do business with them. That would be the most ideal situation. But unfortunately, that's not the case right now. And we know that with a lot of the stories we hear about very well-known companies out there that aren't doing the most ethical things. But I hope that changes.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, like, that's the work that we're doing to make sure that we are considering, people and planet throughout all of our operations, supply chain included, because that's where a lot of things, go missing, don't necessarily come to the surface, and they need to be uncovered. We need to check in on it, um, and so it's hard to do. Like, this is the hardest work that we'll ever do, but, something, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
For sure.
For those folks listening live, feel free to post any comments or questions you might have for Katie and Sumreen in this last 10 minutes. I see a comment about capturing carbon as one of the direct impact solutions. And, I think technology is and developing those kind of infrastructures is really important. It does need to be done in a blend, at the mix of like policy and collaboration and technology development. And also one framework that I've really enjoyed is design justice, and understanding how we can design solutions within the context of understanding who might be benefiting harmed from this solution, and just really applying it to every step of that, even the supply chain or the business operations, is I think one of a really cool way to look at it, and thing that's better, or maybe are we contributing to the problem, and can we make that better? And I think engaging employees in that too is really important, and being transparent of, okay, this is what we're doing, and these are the potential harms, and we're trying to make something great, but these are things that need to be improved. And I think that also gets a lot of ideas spinning, and a lot of great conversations as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when it comes to carbon capture and carbon storage, yeah, it's one slice of the pie, and there's so much that needs to be reconsidered as part of the clean transition. Carbon capture is exciting because the idea of actually extracting the problem from the atmosphere versus changing the system. One seems a little bit easier than the other because one can be engineered and created using tech, whereas the other one involves people and relationships and dynamics and incentive structures. But again, it also comes down to our actions and how we work and who we work with. So yeah, I suggest even taking a look at Project Drawdown's list of climate solutions, because it is quite eye-opening when you see how carbon capture, carbon sinks are, maybe a quarter of what can be done for climate solutions. And there's so many others.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in from this conversation. It's all just simmering right now in my mind. Thanks so much for sharing. Kind of curious, Katie, at Fix, you did a lot of work around engaging employees, as well as part of the sustainability. Is there any stories that you have around successful maybe partnerships with local nonprofits that were aligned with some of the work that or the mission that Fix had, and ways that you were able to work with employees to further that partnership?
Yeah, you teed me up nicely here, probably not on purpose, but there was a lovely partnership that we had through meaningful work, actually. And it was with a nonprofit to develop a marketing strategy. So we connected through the platform, and we put their team in touch with our team. And our marketing department was able to work on a skills-based project for this nonprofit who was able to benefit from it. So it was really nice to see, because we listened to their needs, understood their needs, and then were able to apply everything that we knew how to do really well to solve this problem for them. And of course, you're able to solve the challenges that the nonprofit is working on, as well as doing the work that you do every day. So it was a nice mix, and it was really successful. So thank you, Raj, for helping make that happen.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, someone else is commenting here that sorry, from my view, I can't see folks' names, unfortunately, but they do agree that we need multiple different systems, and to achieve, and their collaboration to actually achieve sustainable goals. And I think that's something that I see a lot in the role of your companies at Reeve, for example, or at Moment, really being that connector to like change on the industry scale. Sumreen, also, how have some of the partnerships that you've undertaken and ended up in success for Moment Energy?
Yeah, so I mean, it ties directly into the comment that was just made, is that it takes a lot of different groups to create a successful circular economy. And that's really what the ultimate goal is to, well, firstly, it's to create a circular economy for electric vehicle batteries. And secondly, it's to provide increased accessibility to clean, reliable, and affordable electricity. But in terms of the partnerships, so we really need engagement from different groups. So one is the automakers themselves, for them to say that, hey, we do believe that our batteries should be sustainably handled at the end of life, and they have to put in the effort for that. So that's one of the steps. The other one is legislation. So really having the government also play a role here. And in Europe and China, we've already seen that where they've mandated automakers to collect a certain percentage of end-of-life batteries and to sustainably manage them. So if the OEM's not already thinking about it, that legislation definitely pushes them too. And then there's companies like us that are there to work with them so that we can handle a portion of that supply chain, the circular economy piece. So Moment in particular does the repurposing, but then we know that we want to close that loop. So recyclers also play a role. So it really does take a wide array of different companies to come together to make this change. So we've got in partnerships in all of those spaces, and that's why I think we're best positioned to make a difference in specifically with repurposing and creating a circular economy for electric vehicle batteries.
So cool. Yeah, I guess we're kind of just closing off. Is there any other thoughts or comments that you had, Katie or Sumreen, about from this conversation, or anything you want to impart to our viewers and those who will be viewing this afterwards?
Katie, go ahead.
I guess my final thoughts are stay positive and focus on the solutions, because that's really what we need at this point, is taking ideas and taking action and putting them into action. We have everything at our fingertips. It's just a matter of actually utilizing it. Don't put your morals and values at the door every time you go to work, but actually start utilizing it every day. And I think, well, I believe that every individual action counts, and collectively, that's what creates the change at the end of the day. That's my final thought.
Totally. I love that. For me, it would be to start thinking about the changes that you want to make and really take Earth Day to reflect on that. And if there's not things that you've thought about yet, just today is the opportunity to do that. And not just today, but every other day for the rest of your lives. So it's never too late to start. Just find that thing that you feel like is a place that you can make the most difference. And I'll just tie it back to eventually finding that sweet spot of something you're passionate about and can make the most difference in. And that's really, if all of us fill in these different pieces of the puzzle, the whole puzzle will be complete, and we'll all be making changes in this massive concept of combating climate change.
I love that. Just us being different puzzle pieces, working together, finding those partnerships, driving our own individual change. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, Sumreen, for making this Earth Day a really lively one. Love the ideas that we got a chance to talk about, and that's it for today. That's our first episode of the Bridge to Impact. You can. If you're here as well, later on we'll be public Spotify, and continuing this journey of getting some ideas out there that need to be listened to and that we need to consider as a community.
Thank you so much for having us, Raj, and congratulations on the first successful podcast.
Yes, congrats. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, and we'll be going off live now. Take care, and happy Earth Day.